Welcome to the Friday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell joins me. We'll talk a little bit of baseball at the end with two SEC games last night being Thursday night. But first and foremost, the NFL draft. And boy, this was a fun first round to watch if you're an SEC fan, Blake.
Yeah, it usually is these days, just based on knowing how many players you're going to see in the first round from the SEC, and no different here. I mean, you had your stacked lineup of Alabama players, which has become no surprise. But as we know, I mean, some of the best prospects in this draft were also non-Alabama players, with Kyle Pitts from Florida and Jamar Chase at LSU, and then you look at someone like J.C. Horn, who I think some people thought may go 10 to 15, but he goes at 8, to the Panthers, and it's just pretty loaded roster of players from the SEC in this first round. And again, that's just become less and less of a surprise at this point. We know that the SEC, quite frankly, at times has a chance to field close to half of the first round just based on all the talent that's in the league. So
I just realized the Big 12 did not have a single guy picked in the first round. That is nuts.
Well, I mean, probably wasn't going to happen on the defensive side of the ball. We know that. But,
no, it was not. Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah, this is, and I'll say this too, like, this is one of those drafts that, we don't see every year, because you're not going to have a draft to where the top 3 players, and, there were many discussions that it could have been the top 4 players if the Falcons would have decided to trade, or if they'd have stayed there and, maybe took Justin Fields or someone like that. But it's just you don't see kind of the run on quarterbacks as quickly as we did, at least in this era. Like, we used to see it a lot, and there have been certainly drafts over the years that you could point to. But you have 3 quarterbacks go in the first 3 picks, and then usually we're so used to seeing a lot of offensive linemen early, or maybe some defensive players. But you just got a lot of talented offensive guys, and I think that's where you just saw a run on some of these offensive guys, and it just made for a very interesting setup just based on how things played out.
Well, it was 12 picks until the defender was taken?
I guess.
Which just was surreal.
Well, J.C. Horn, he would have been.
No, that's right. Horn went at 8.
Well, and that was the projection, though, was a lot of people thought that it may have been probably, like, a lot of people thought it was going to be to 12 for maybe the first defensive guy to be taken. But I think the Panthers sort of set everything. They're the ones that sort of changed that part of the draft, because when they took Horn, when people thought there was a possibility that they could maybe take a quarterback, even though they have Sam Darnold, there was the thinking that, okay, maybe they decide to go with someone like Justin Fields or maybe Mac Jones. And then you had the Broncos right after that, who a lot of people had pegged to go quarterback as well. And again, the same too, Fields and Jones. And because those 2 guys had fallen, you kept thinking, okay, well, maybe these are the spots where those guys could go, but it just, it didn't happen. And I think that's what kind of set off, some of the trades that you had, and ultimately, Bill Belichick, just the guy. I don't know what's in the water there for him this offseason, but this is like, and I made this comment to someone else, like, this is Belichick's last stand. Like, he went out and signed all these guys in the offseason, and now, what do you know, he gets the quarterback probably he wanted from the beginning, fall all the way to him to 15 with Mac Jones without even having to lift a finger.
Yeah, I want to go back to Mac Jones in just a minute. But 2 things. First of all, it was J.C. Horn was the first defender taken, and then the Broncos take Patrick Surtain II next at 9. And then Micah Parsons from Penn State goes to the Cowboys at 12. So that was the next defender. But that makes the Big 12 thing even crazier, because the Big 12 was known for offense and an offense-heavy draft. The fact that none of the guys from the league, and this is not a Big 12 podcast, this is an SEC podcast, so we're not going to dwell long on that, but I'm just, the more that sinks in, that blows me away.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you've got as many Alabama players going as you do, and, like we said, you got as many SEC, there's only so much room elsewhere for everyone else, and, just one of those drafts where you just, I mean, again, a lot of SEC players going here in the first round, and you had some others elsewhere. Like, it's interesting because you had sort of those teammates, which kind of became a theme of the draft based on some of the picks. But like, you had teammates from some of the other teams. You had the 2 guys at Virginia Tech You had the two guys at
Northwestern.
Miami, like, Jalen Phillips and Gregory Rousseau. Like, you just had that was the interesting thing too, I thought, is, obviously we're used to that with some of the SEC teams, but you had a lot of teammates go in the first round here, as you said, with Northwestern as well. So.
Yeah, and probably the crazy stat is the Heisman winner wasn't even the first guy from his school taken at his position.
Yeah, that's when you're doing okay, I think, if you're Nick Saban. So.
Yeah, I want to get to some crazy stuff with Alabama a little later, but just to recap the first round from an SEC perspective, Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Florida, goes to the Falcons, 4 overall. Jamar Chase, receiver at LSU, Bengals at 5. Jalen Waddle, Alabama receiver, Dolphins at 6. J.C. Horn, South Carolina corner, to the Panthers at 8, followed by Surtain at 9 to the Broncos. Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner. Alabama wide receiver to the Eagles at 10. Mac Jones, Alabama quarterback, to the Patriots at 15. Alex Leatherwood, the surprise of the first round, Alabama left tackle who will probably play left guard maybe, will move to the Raiders at pick 17. Jameen Davis, Kentucky linebacker, at 19 to the football team. Kadarius Toney, wide receiver, 20 to the Giants. He went to Florida, of course, was a big playmaker for the Gators. Najja Harris, running backs don't go a ton in the first round, but he goes to the Steelers at 21, and Eric Stokes at Georgia, the last SEC guy picked in the first round, corner to the Packers at 29. So the SEC has 11 of the first 21.
Yeah, it's not bad. You'll probably take that, and I think the league will take every opportunity to promote that. You mentioned it, the Leatherwood one is the one that people are talking about, and I know you've got a note on that, but I just think at this point, you know what you're getting with the Raiders. Like, there may be guys that you don't even think should be projected as high as they are, but as we've seen from the Raiders and Mike Mayock and John Gruden, they're not afraid to take chances if it's a guy that they are very high on. And clearly, with Alex Leatherwood, they're very high on him. And, people are making the joke that maybe the Raiders only watch Alabama and Clemson, but you know what? I mean, the track record seems to suggest that's okay if you only watch those two teams, because there are a lot of good players on there. So even if Leatherwood's someone that was projected a bit lower, I don't think it's a surprise that if he was going to go higher, that it was the Raiders to do it, because they've proven that they don't really, they have their own kind of way they do things. And, maybe they thought that he was just the best pick for them right there at number 17. So.
What's funny about the Raiders is this has gone on for a while. Al Davis is dead. They don't have the same front office running things. They get Mike Mayock, who's pretty respected, and yet the trend of zagging where everyone else zigs, or however you want to say it, continues. But the Leatherwood pick, I have a good buddy that I've known since college, and every year during the draft we will text or call. And this guy is not a professional talent evaluator, but he had some college opportunities that he turned down, and just knows football as much as anybody I know that doesn't or has never done it for a living. And like, we have talked many drafts, and he will say this guy's going to bust and this guy's going to hit, and he's got an uncanny ability to be right. I've seen this now for a couple of decades. But I was texting about Leatherwood, and I said, what do you think about that? He said, well, I think he was a lot better than Willis, who went higher a year ago from Alabama. So there's that. I don't know. And they talked about this on the draft last night. They said it may not be a bad pick. In other words, he might be worth it, but it's just not what everybody else had. Most people had him as a mid to late second rounder. So I don't know. I think I would have been tempted to trade out of that pick.
Yeah.
And go down a little lower to do it. I don't know that it's there's two ways to look at a draft, right? How did you do with the player, which is ultimately what people are going to look at, and how do you do with draft capital? So I think if you're the Raiders, you missed it on half the equation there.
Well, and it was an area of need for the Raiders. I thought they had a lot more needs probably defensively versus, look, they do have needs on the offensive line, but I thought that their defensive needs probably outweighed that. But, maybe it's Mike Mayock and John Gruden saying, hey, Aaron Rodgers, we got you an offensive lineman. What do you think? Like, this is your chance. You want out of Green Bay, you want to come here, give us an opportunity. I'm telling you, I know rumors are rumors, but you saw yesterday all the Aaron Rodgers stuff about him wanting to be traded from the Packers, and it seemed like everything pointed to two teams, and that was either the Raiders or the Broncos. I don't know that that's completely out of the realm of possibility at this point. I know the Packers are kind of digging in their heels and saying we are not going to trade Aaron Rodgers. Well, I've heard that a lot before when it comes to trades before they're actually made. So I think that's an interesting one to keep an eye on with the Raiders, because that is something that ultimately may not happen, but I think Aaron Rodgers is a pretty strong personality type person. And I think once he's made up his mind that he wants to go somewhere, he'll find a way to make it happen. And the Packers may want to do it kicking and screaming, but they'll have no choice probably at some point. So that's something maybe that kind of adds an intriguing element is they do go offensive line at 17. Maybe that's something else to where that can say, hey, here you go. We got you a future guy that can sort of, block for you and make sure you don't get, taken down. So that's something else to kind of keep in look at. I guess with that scenario, it could be very interesting to see how it plays out.
What is in the water with quarterbacks these days? Because you used to have your quarterback, and quarterbacks almost never got traded. I mean, you had the Peyton or the Eli Manning deal. You have some deals like at the draft where a guy just doesn't want to go a certain place, right? But
yeah,
a guy was your quarterback, and he was your quarterback basically forever. And there aren't a lot of guys that hit the free agent market, and now you got him traded left and right in the offseason. You got a team that replaced their quarterback who took them to a Super Bowl 2 years ago. A year later, I mean, it's nuttiness, man. You got two very unhappy quarterbacks, or you got one unhappy quarterback in Rodgers and another one in Deshaun Watson that I don't know what in the world you do with him that you figure are not going to be taking the first snaps for those teams next year. But I've never seen anything like it with quarterbacks these days. You see more quarterback movement this year than you probably did a decade put together coming in.
Yeah, you'll love this stat. I don't know if you saw it, but about the Packers and their history, suggesting that Aaron Rodgers will not actually play another snap for the Packers because guess what? Bart Starr played 16 seasons with Green Bay. Brett Favre played 16 seasons with Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers has played 16 seasons with Green Bay. So 16 could ultimately prove to be the unlucky number for the Packers there just based on that trend. So.
Well, when they made the Jordan Love pick a couple years ago, I thought that was really shrewd because that's the same thing that they did when they got Rodgers. Remember, Rodgers slipped down the draft. He was maybe a top 5 overall pick, and then he slipped to the Packers at 20 whatever, and that was like the talk. And then he got to sit and develop, and it feels like the Packers just did the same thing with Love, and now that may have a payoff a little sooner than everybody anticipated.
Well, and I think a lot of people – we're sort of in the thinking that last night at 29, when the Packers were sitting there, and you still have a guy like Elijah Moore available. I think a lot of Packers fans were, they were very intrigued. I think by him, which that's a guy that, quite frankly, I get it, his size, but I have no idea how he is still on the board. But I think he's going to be much better than a guy like that, than being picked in the second round, which I think he'll go pretty early here in the second round. But everybody was thinking, okay, well, maybe they're going to get a wide receiver, a last-ditch effort here to change Rodgers' mind. You're not going to do that. One pick's not going to change that. But I do think they actually did a pretty good job. And we talked about, another SEC guy, Eric Stokes from Georgia. I mean, they need help defensively, especially in that area. And so that's actually, I thought, a pretty good pick. And I see some people already just knocking it and saying, well, why would we do that? Why would they not just go get wide receiver? Which, like I said, I wouldn't disagree with if they had someone like, Moore, who was still available. But I don't think that's a terrible pick to take Stokes, knowing that defense still needs some things that they need to figure out too. That could help Aaron Rodgers as much as anything, but I think that's kind of a fascinating part of the equation as well.
Yeah, putting my fan hat on a moment, with the Titans sitting there at 22 last night, I'm thinking, great, we can either get Elijah Moore, we can get Christian Barmore. I'm fine with either one. Both of them made it out of the first round, surprisingly. And then they take Caleb Farley, who played as much football last year as Chris Farley, and had a couple of surgeries to boot. So I don't know. I was kind of hoping as a Titans fan to see one of those two SEC guys fall. Now, the Farley pick may end up being genius. I don't know. That's one of those that it will either be a genius pick in hindsight or it will be an awful pick. And I don't know that there's a middle ground there on that one. But maybe we can get one of those two guys later.
Yeah.
We being the Titans, but I don't know. I'm not holding my breath on that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Like I said, the first 5 picks, I guess, of the second round are the Jags, the Jets, Falcons, Dolphins, Eagles. It'd be interesting to see. I think you could see someone like Barmore going pretty quickly off the board. Like I said, I think Elijah Moore probably goes. I mean, another one I thought that I was pretty surprised to see fall out of the first round, and that was Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. I thought he would be taken a bit higher, and I'm kind of surprised that he's still on the board because if you look at some of the mocks and the talent evaluators and the notes and stuff, like he felt like a guy that was probably going to wind up in the top 20. But again, that's where we say when you have some of these trades and you see kind of the run on offensive players, the way that there was so early in this draft, it kind of changed things a little bit defensively, and it's all about team need too. And maybe he just didn't fit, some of the schemes for some of the teams that were picking at that point in the draft. But I was kind of surprised that he's still there too. So I think a team, a lot of different teams, I think could use a guy like that. And I think you could even, kind of start off with some of those first 5 teams that are going to be picking here in the second round.
Well, I'm at NFL.com. Their draft board, Barmore, they had ranked as the number 12 player in the draft. He's the top available player, and then the next SEC guy is Moore at 22, according to their mocks. So, I mean, not their mocks, but their board, which those are going to differ a lot by people. But Barmore, that surprises me because I just didn't see a lot of red flags with that guy. I mean, I know that there was some chatter that, he didn't take well to coaching and things like that. But Nick Saban came out and made a pretty demonstrative statement. And if you could survive at Alabama and do well, and remember how well he played in the postseason too. I mean, he had 3 sacks and a good number of tackles. I mean, this is a kid that it's not just potential, it's production there too. And the same with Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I think it's just always strange too. And that's the thing is like you can go into these drafts projecting that, okay, we think this guy's going to go here. But then when you have the trades that we had, in the first round, like that always has sort of that ripple effect to where, okay, maybe this guy felt like he was a really good fit for this team at this spot. But when you have a trade, okay, now you have teams switching around and maybe it just is a run to where, he's just not a great fit maybe in certain schemes or certain systems. But I really think with Elijah Moore, like I just think this is a guy that feels like he's made for this era of the NFL in terms of the speed that he has. And again, I understand the size aspect, but like this guy plays bigger than his size. I mean, we've seen it. Like he's a strong kid, and I think that's one that I would be very surprised if he slips further than maybe even these first couple picks. Like I just feel like you see a lot of teams out there have to be thinking, okay, there's a way to use this guy in a very effective manner, and we've seen that. But I'm very curious to kind of see where he falls to, because I think someone's getting a pretty good value pick no matter where he goes here in the first couple picks.
One of the other stranger things is the SEC was just such a defense-first league for so long, and now you're seeing the league just dominate the passing positions. The quarterbacks, the receivers. You even see a running back go in the first round. Alabama alone, Blake, here's just the last 2 years, the first 3 rounds of the draft. This is what you could have put together just from Alabama. You have a couple of first-round quarterbacks in Tua and Mac Jones. You have Najja Harris, a running back, who goes first round last night. Your receivers, this is just absurd. Ruggs, Judy, Waddle, and Smith. You have a couple of tackles who go in the first round, and Willis and Leatherwood. You got a couple linemen in Davis and Barmore. I assume Barmore will be in the first 3 rounds. I'm just going to make a pick there. You have Lewis and Jennings at linebacker. You have the safety and McKinney in the corner and Surtain. It's nuts. I mean, this is just, it's crazy what Alabama puts out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you win national championships. You got guys that are going to immediately be plugged in the NFL and have success. And when you're going up against other college teams that don't have that, that certainly gives you a nice little advantage. So, yeah, it is incredible. I mean, we always talk about it. It's one thing to get a guy that comes in as a very, highly touted 5-star recruit, but it's another thing to actually continue to develop that guy into more than just a 5-star recruit that comes in and maybe just stays the same based on the talent that he already has. And I think that's just what Alabama is so good at is, they develop guys into players that already feel like that they're, guys that maybe feel flawless from a high school standpoint, but they can identify all those little things that can help them take even bigger steps once they actually get into college. And I think that's just, again, that's why they've had so much success as a program.
Do you get the feeling 15 years from now we're going to look back and say Mac Jones was the best value pick of the first round?
I mean, I think it's certainly a possibility because, for me, and the Patriots and Bill Belichick, like he's not one that's going to just go out and pick a quarterback this high unless he feels pretty strongly that, he wasn't just going to pick Mac Jones because Mac Jones had fallen to 15. That's the way I think you have to look at it. Yes, and was it surprising to see Jones slide? I don't think so because, when you saw the Bears trade up to get Justin Fields at 11, you knew at that point, unless there was another trade for a team that needed a quarterback, which, the Jets traded up, but we knew they weren't taking a second quarterback. You knew Mac Jones was going to the Patriots. And I think for Belichick to not have to make not even have to lift a finger to trade or do anything, and he could stay at 15 and get a guy that, yes, there was a lot of rumors, there were a lot of smoke screens that Mac Jones could go 3 to the 49ers, but, ultimately they take Trey Lance. But I think just the fact is, you got to remember who's picking there. And Bill Belichick is not a guy that is going to, every single season, pick a quarterback in the first or second round. Now, obviously, he hasn't had to because Brady's been there. But he is just not. Look, they picked Brady. We know they picked Brady, right? So I think that's sort of a situation where you've got to believe he feels pretty strongly that Mac Jones can be, a high-level starter in the NFL, or I don't think they're making that move because, really, you look at the moves they made this offseason. They bring in Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. They've got, 2 top 10 tight ends now on their team. Their wide receiver unit, I think, still leaves a little bit to be desired, but you put Mac Jones immediately in a situation to succeed. And, Cam Newton's there. We understand sort of the dynamic there. But I just don't think they're taking Mac Jones at 15 just to take him. And because Bill Belichick has a connection with Nick Saban, I think they're taking him knowing that, hey, we're all in here on Mac Jones, and we think he can be that guy, that can lead our franchise forward for the next 10 plus years.
Well, the Patriots have been lacking in receivers for about as long as I can remember, at least on paper, and they always figure it out. But, the Patriots just look at players as fungible. And so, at least it seems to me they do. So if you look at it that way, there were so many quarterbacks, and you got roughly half the teams in front of them that aren't going to need quarterbacks. Somebody's going to fall to them at that pick. And I don't know if he was the guy they wanted or not, but they were in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, no, they were for sure. And, I think too, just, Josh McDaniels, you can say what you want about whether he's going to have success as a head coach or whatever eventually at some point. But, I think just having him there to work with someone like Mac Jones, like they're going to put him in a position to succeed. And it's just a matter of, can he do that? Can he make the throws they need him to make? And I think if you look at it at this point, you feel like this is the kind of system he can thrive in. Like maybe there are other systems that would not have been a great fit based on, his specific skill set. But I think for the Patriots, like this is that fit. And this is the one we identified before the draft and said, okay, if this is a scenario that happens, like Mac Jones is not falling beyond the Patriots. Like if they have to trade up to get him, they may even do that. But I think they felt so confident knowing how the board had played out to that point that after the Bears traded up and took Justin Fields, you knew, it was the done deal. It was Mac Jones fits the Patriots, how they want to play. And now, again, it's just a matter of, can he make the throws at the NFL level in that system? And I think that it's probably the best case scenario for Mac Jones, just based on knowing that you're going to learn under a guy that, developed Tom Brady. Josh McDaniels has to be added in there as well, just based on his offensive scheme. So I just think it's a perfect match just based on what they want to do.
Well, the moment that he really popped to me was watching that Georgia game where they're getting some pressure on him and he's hanging in the pocket. He is not getting flustered, and he is putting the ball on a dime to his receivers. Now, look, when you got those guys running routes for you,
right.
And you got a first-round left tackle to hit your blind side, it tends to make things a little easier. But just the way that he showed poise and just put the ball right where it needed to be, which, oh, by the way, sounds like a guy that used to quarterback the Patriots to a T. I came away from that game. That was the moment I made up my mind on Mac Jones.
Well, and I don't remember who it was on the broadcast last night on ESPN. It may have been Booker, but he's pointing out that, when I think it's like you're pushing, you're not understanding maybe necessarily why Mac Jones should be this high because he can't get around in the pocket as well as Justin Fields or Trey Lance.
He doesn't need to.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is I think that sometimes just gets really overblown in an era where we're trying to compare everyone to Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, and guys like that. But I think you have to remember at the end of the day, the quarterback still has to throw the ball. Like he still has to throw the ball down the field. And I think that's always going to be of the highest value. It's great if he has legs and can run. But at the same time, I think we've gotten to a point to where we're so valuing the dual threat that sometimes we have to remember there are still really outstanding quarterbacks that could just be really outstanding, throwing quarterbacks and don't necessarily have to run to make plays. And I think that's something that again, I'm not saying that certainly it's not a bad thing, but I mean, I think when you see the guys go that went as high as they did, when you see Trey Lance go at 3, Zach Wilson goes at 2 to the Jets. He's another one of those guys. And then you see the Bears trade up for Justin Fields. Like those guys have those things in common in terms of they feel like the guys who are going to be able to make things happen, not only with their arm, but with their legs. But that I don't think is to say that Mac Jones is going to be a bad quarterback right off the bat just because he can't run or he can't, scramble for a 30-yard, play on any time that he wants. I think that's just something that I'm not saying it's completely overblown because I get it. Like this is the era we're in now because we've seen what Mahomes and Jackson and those guys can do. But at the same time, like the quarterback's role is still to throw the ball down the field more than anything. And I think if you have a guy that can throw it and make the throws, like you just said, that is still very, very valuable. And so I think we maybe lean into that a little too much and just knock guys who can't necessarily run the way other guys can. It's great to have, and it's a great asset. But if you can't throw the ball at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great you are with your legs. So I think that's something that I would probably look at and say, I think some of that criticism is not necessarily related towards just Mac Jones. I think it's just we maybe lean in the opposite direction too much sometimes and say that a quarterback that can't run isn't going to be a great quarterback in the NFL when that's just not the case. And we've seen so many examples of guys that don't have to do that to be successful.
Well, there are many ways to win in sports. I'm not a one-size-fits-all guy. And the thing is, when you are mobile and you scramble a lot and you have a rolling pocket, that cuts out half the field. And I thought with the way Alabama was constructed last year, when you have multiple guys who can get open and have to be guarded, when you can stay in the pocket like that and scan the whole field like he did and find the right guy at the right time, you don't need the mobility as much. I mean, yeah, it's nice. I've always valued the guy that 3rd and 8, you've got everybody covered and he breaks containment and he goes for 11 and the clock moves. And that's the play that Mac Jones probably is not going to make. And you saw Trevor Lawrence show some value in that last year a little bit too. But I'm okay with it. I really am, because I think everything just works for him.
Well, and I think that the benefit you have with the Patriots is how their roster is constructed right now. Like I said, they did go out and get 2 top 10 tight ends in Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So you don't have to necessarily sit back and throw the ball 70 yards down the field. Like you've got the ability with those guys, especially, to just make those sort of quick throws. You can do the same because we know how they use guys out of the backfield too, like James White. I mean, James White over the years has been someone that they throw the ball to a ton out of the backfield. And so he's going to be able to succeed just by having guys like that are going to be able to get open in some of those short kind of, intermediate type routes where he can get the ball out pretty quick to those kind of guys. Like I said, their ability to stretch the field with the wide receiver group is still to be determined because, again, their wide receiving core is far from great. Like they've got a lot of works in progress, I think, when you look at some of the young guys that they still have there. But I think they added Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar this offseason. But they've still got some things they've got to work out on the wide receiver front. But they have so many other options now with adding the 2 tight ends, having James White in the backfield. And so I think that gives Mac Jones the chance to have a lot of success. Now, look, I don't know. Is he gonna start day one? Like, I don't know that that's going to happen because Cam is still there, and they did bring Cam back. So I think there's a lot of things you could work out just for this season, but I think they made moves this offseason to allow Mac Jones to have success in the long term, even if it's not necessarily, in game 3. So
We've gone 30 minutes and we haven't even talked about the Gators. I mean, you got a generational tight end in Kyle Pitts, who was the first guy picked, and you got Kadarius Toney, who frankly I'd forgotten how dynamic he was. I mean, there's so many playmakers in this league, and you watch his highlight reel last night, and I don't remember, was he the one that they were comparing to Tyreek Hill?
I think that,
or was it Jalen Waddle?
I don't remember.
I want to say it was Waddle, but I mean, he has a lot of Tyreek Hill qualities in him, just in the open field. And somebody made the point that he's going to have to learn to go down and just try to quit making plays. But my goodness, the ability for both those kids is just coming out their ears.
Yeah, I think, like you said, with Kyle Pitts, for the Falcons, it was a no-brainer, I thought. You could look at the quarterback and say, well, we're going to do something with Matt Ryan and we're going to take Fields or, Mac Jones or someone. But I just think it's a no-brainer. You can't pass up someone like Pitts that if sometimes it's easy to say, well, like you were talking about zigging and zagging with the Raiders. Sometimes it's able to, kind of fool yourself into thinking that, one guy gets hyped up so much that you're like, well, we're not buying it. Well, this guy, there's no way not to buy it. Like, this guy is just fantastic. And you just look at his size, and now, you put him right there with that offensive group, which, offense has not really been the problem for the Falcons. Their defense has been the issue. But I just don't think you could have passed up on a guy like this. He's just too good. And I think he's another one, like we say, like he's a 10-plus year guy. Like, he's that kind of guy that you feel like you're going to be able to plug in. And he's one that you can plug in from day one and feel like is going to have a lot of success. And, the Falcons, there's still a lot got to be determined on them, I think, especially in the next 2 seasons. The Matt Ryan situation, what do they do with Julio Jones? Like, there's a lot of things that I think the Falcons are going to be looking at and staring at from a decision-making standpoint. And that could affect, how effective Kyle Pitts can be. But I think he's going to step onto the field and knowing what is around him and being able to put him at so many different spots, just based on his size, he's going to be really good. And you talked about, I thought the Giants are one of the biggest, winners to be able to move down to 20 the way they did after which what happened is Devontae Smith was still sitting there at number 10, and the Cowboys basically swiped the Giants by trading up with the Eagles for the Eagles to move up and get Devontae Smith. And so that kind of put the Giants in a spot where they would have taken him at 11, but they trade out with the Bears, of course. The Bears come up and get Fields. And I think for the Giants to get Toney at 20, I'm with you. Like, I think it was a great spot. And to get him at that point at number 20, I thought was just really good. And you look at that receiving core, my goodness, like they picked up Kenny Golladay this offseason. They already had Darius Slayton there, of course, from Auburn. Now, you add Toney to the mix. Like, that gives the Giants some really dangerous weapons to work with. And I think Toney immediately adds just another playmaker to that offense.
What do you think about the Devontae Smith pick? Because I have mixed feelings about it. My gut tends to be, don't overthink it. The guy was productive. We saw that catch against LSU that just, I'm not saying that's what blew him up, because if you watch, you knew what you had, but that was just one of those, that was his Heisman moment, I guess is a good way to put it. But, man, he is so slim. He's like, if you're a baseball fan, it looks like he's Eric Davis in football pads. If you remember the former Red Star, remember how much he would get hurt stealing bases and running into walls. And of course, football is physical times 50 compared to baseball. So there's that. I have a little bit of concern because of the build, but my goodness, in terms of the between the ears and the attitude and the production, I don't have an issue. That's another one of those, like, if he's going to stay healthy, I love the pick. But you just watch him, and he is so slim and small compared to the rest of the guys. you do wonder if one hit can ruin it all for him, and that's my concern. It's not the production or anything else; it's that.
The NFL bulking system is gonna really pay off, I think, for someone like him. But I mean, yeah, and I understand. Like it makes sense when you compare him to some of the others, and I mean, you just look at the guys and. I mean, how some of these guys are built, and it's just it's ridiculous. But I still think, just based on what he can do and how he can get open and how quickly he can change a game, and that's what we said. Like that's what NFL teams want, is they want a guy who, with one play, can completely change everything, and it's exactly what he can do. In that situation, and I think just seeing him make some of the plays that he made, again, you kind of look at just a guy, I think, that has a knack for where he needs to be, where he needs to go get the ball or have the ball get to him. And really, again, with just one play, I think that can change the entire landscape of a game. And I think that's just that's a very sexy aspect for teams that are looking for playmakers, especially for the Eagles, who feel like they're all in on Jalen Hurts at this point. And if you want to do that, you need to have weapons around him. And so I think at that point, maybe it's a different conversation if Smith goes to, I don't know, let's say he goes higher. Maybe the Lions take him at 7 or something. Then I think it's a lot more interesting for the Eagles and maybe what they decide to do. But I just feel like they at that point realize that, hey, we have decided to go all in on our quarterback. We traded Carson Wentz to the Colts. We need Jalen Hurts to have success quickly, and we feel like the best path to doing that is to take the guy who just won the Heisman Trophy and is a very elite wide receiver, even like you said, even if there are maybe some of those things that they'll have to work on, from a strength and just kind of adding more size. But I think that's something that a lot of teams feel like that they can work out themselves versus, maybe the guy just being someone that drops a lot of balls or not being great at running routes. And he has all that down. So I think they feel like they can probably solve some of those other issues.
Well, he's also a dynamic punt returner, but that's the double-edged sword. It's like, do you want to expose a guy that I guess you want to be your best receiver to that kind of pounding too? I mean, look, it works sometimes. You saw the Chiefs do it with Hill. But again, considering the build there, you wonder a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's something too. Like teams want to be able to use guys, in a variety of positions or ways, and I think that's another thing, that aspect that's probably very appealing for them. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. But I think that at least he's in a situation to where, he can have success, because I think we saw Jalen Hurts have some success last season. And at least, the Eagles it's a new era for the Eagles in terms of coaching staff and all that. So you feel like he's getting in now for a team that, feels like that they're trying to build something here, and maybe they can get back on track and have some success with him there.
What'd you think about Jamar Chase going before any of those guys? Because I mean, the production, I mean, it's like I look back at the last 2 years in the SEC, and there's been so many phenomenal receivers. Like, I have a hard time in my head distinguishing who's better. Of course, Chase is probably going to be a little bit more durable, but I'm not crazy about the concept of a guy that sits out a year on his team. So, I don't know that the NFL really cares that much, so it's a personal thing. But what did you make of that?
Hey, the theme of the night, teammates. Like, you just got guys who, I mean, you can't tell me that Joe Burrow did not have a hand in them deciding to pick Jamar Chase.
Oh, yeah. 5. I mean, that did work out fairly well, didn't it?
Well, and that's the thing is, I mean, you heard some of the analysts just screaming about, well, why are they not taking Penei Sewell, the offensive, to protect Joe Burrow? And I get it. I completely understand. Like, I mean, I think you can make the case for both guys. And, that's the thing is people say, we got to build up the line before you can, I mean, and it's not like the Bengals lack receivers. Like, they got a pretty good receiving core already with Tyler Boyd there and, T. Higgins and those guys. But, I mean, still, it's something where I just don't think they felt like they could pass up this guy and Jamar Chase because, last season we talked about him, sitting out and all that. But, like, we were talking about this guy as potentially like, the top pick. I mean, again, the chance of him going 1, we're not going to be maybe high, but like it's still like he was being viewed as one of the top players like as of last year, and just based on his skill set. So I just think that the Joe Burrow connection, I felt like this. I did a mock draft for one of the other things I do, and like I had him going here at 5 because I just didn't think that if you're, Joe Burrow had to be in the year saying, hey, me and this guy did some special things in college. I think there's a chance we can do that again in the NFL. And I just felt like for the Bengals, there are probably enough good offensive linemen that are still out there that they can get to help out in that area. And I just think that wide receiver wise, you weren't seeing a lot of Jamar Chases on day 2 or day 3. So I just felt like it was something to where they probably just said, hey, we need to go with this and really have a chance to, build a group that Joe Burrow is going to be able to throw to. And again, we talk about playmakers. I mean, there's no doubt that Jamar Chase is an absolute playmaker. And I think that just the connection, the chemistry they have, it was too appealing for the Bengals to pass up in that spot.
We haven't spent much time on defense. J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain went back to back. Who do you think made the better pick there?
Well, I mean, I think both are really good players, and I think the connections make sense. But I think for the Broncos, to get Surtain there at 9, I feel like is a really good because you felt like in the most of the projections were that the Cowboys were going to take him at 10, which I think ultimately is why the Cowboys traded out with the Eagles, for Devonta Smith. But I think for the Broncos, that's a really good choice. I mean, they're a defensive minded coaching staff. And to get him a player that I think is just, we talk about guys and you're building for long term at one position. I just think that they had to go this route of trying to build up the secondary. And I just feel like that he is someone that will, playing for a defensive minded head coach. I think that he's going to have, Vic Fangio, I think that he's going to have a chance to really have a lot of success there with the Broncos. And so I feel like, what they've done in the offseason and now to add him, I mean, for him to be at number 9, like we said, and I think that's a product of there being so many good offensive players going ahead of him. But I think he's fantastic. And so I feel like that was just a really, really good choice for the Broncos. Like I said, not knocking the Panthers. I think the Panthers had a lot of different needs. But, that was one of them too, is that their defense has not been great for a while. So that's also, I think, a really good choice for the Panthers. I think a lot of people in their minds just kept thinking, okay, well, maybe they go quarterback, maybe they go Fields or Mac Jones, but they're clearly, they sent the message they're fine with Sam Darnold. And I just feel like at this point, for both of those teams, for the Broncos and the Panthers, getting those two guys, those two SEC guys that, as we saw, I mean, throughout their careers, like they're really talented. I can't say that, either one's a bad choice for sure. So,
well, there's a lot of commonalities here, right? Both of them had fathers who were very, very good NFL players. Yeah. Both of them came in as true freshmen, played right away. To me, and this is not a sideswipe at J.C. Horn, everybody's his own person. We're all wired differently. But the character aspect and the fact that one of them played out the season, one of them opted out when his coach got fired. I mean, Surtain is just supposed to be like one of the best kids that's ever been down there. Again, and that's not trying to throw shade at Horn at all. But I will take the kid like that every time where the self-destruct factor is almost non-existent. And that's the case with him. I think in terms of handling the pressure, the family, the who he played for, the handling Nick Saban and the pressure cooker down there, and just the character that he's got that people raved about. That's the kind of kid that I want on my team 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, and I think he's just, like I said, I think he's in a spot to succeed with, playing for a coach like that who, the Broncos may not be the best team in the NFL, just in terms of they've still got some work to do offensively, of course, too. But I just think that when you play for a defensive guy like that's at the head coach position, like he's going to put you in a spot to succeed. And I just feel like that, for the Broncos, that was an area of need. They addressed it, and you feel like they got a really, really talented player at that position.
Blake, big moment for Kentucky. Jameen Davis, a linebacker for the Cats, who was very productive goes 19th overall to the Washington Football Club. We had a lot of fun with the football club last night with some friends and things with the Washington's inability to change names yet. But in any case, that's a big moment for Kentucky. Mark Stoops has built defense first. It's taken him a while, but he's now putting elite players in the league. And so that was a big moment, I thought, for Kentucky.
Yeah, it was. And, I mean, I think Davis, again, kind of go back to the Surtain thing. I mean, it's one of those where you're playing for a coach that knows defense. And, Ron Rivera is someone who I know his teams, the Panthers there in the later years, struggled a bit on that side of the ball. But this is still a guy that really wants to revamp that defense for Washington. Although they've had some success there. I mean, that's, they got in the playoffs last year and all that. But, I mean, I think this is a guy that really, if you're Ron Rivera, again, we talk about knowing coaches and their preferences and that type of stuff. Like, this was a guy they were not going to pass on, just based on having a guy like this that can sort of anchor your defense there at that position. And I think that it's one of those where, again, it's about fit too, because that's what we say sometimes is players can go in the first round and they can be very talented. They go top 15, top 5, or whatever. But, if it's not a position or a place that you're going to be able to succeed in, it's great to be picked high, but you want to be able to find the right fit. And I think that for the most part, if you go up and down for a lot of these SEC players that were picked in the first round, like as we're saying, like they feel like good fits for the team that they're on. And you don't always get that. You get teams that are just so horrendously bad, which, the teams picking near the top are the worst teams. But if they're in positions to succeed, whether it's, with the talent around them or it's a new coaching staff or something like that, that's ultimately what matters. And I think for a lot of these SEC players, like they got put in really good positions to succeed, maybe not necessarily right away, but like within the first couple of years. And so I think Davis, he's just someone that, feels like a great fit for Washington based on what Ron Rivera wants to do, a defensive-minded guy. And I think that probably for Davis, he'll be plugged in right away. I mean, when you look at Washington's defense, I would be very surprised if he's not plugged in right away and having a chance to, immediately make an impact there for them.
Blake, I guess about the only guy we haven't talked about much. We didn't really mention Jalen Waddle a lot. I think everybody knows what he is. But Najja Harris goes 21st overall to the Steelers, who seem to really make great use of their running back picks for as long as I can remember. Waddle and Harris, give me some thoughts on those two.
Yeah, teammate theme again, right, with Waddle. The Dolphins clearly, at this point, sold on Tua. They were kind of in that mix and thinking that Deshaun Watson could wind up there. as of now, we don't really know what's going to happen with that situation. So I think that, Waddle just made a ton of sense for them. And, he's someone that I think that, I don't want to say people forgot about, but it's like, I think hopefully we all understand just how friggin' good. This guy's just so good. Like, I have no doubts that he's going to be a very, very, impact player right away. And boy, that's a group too. You talk about a group to have a chance to have success. They picked up Will Fuller this offseason, and they've still got Devontae Parker there. I think that Dolphins wide receiver group, if Tua's, there are no excuses where, Tua's got the weapons to work with now. So I think it'll be interesting to see how well, that connection plays out there. And then with Najja Harris, as they said on the broadcast last night, I don't think there was zero surprise at all that he goes to the Steelers here at 24. This had kind of been the projection all along with James Conner, who, signed with the Cardinals. They needed someone like this to step in. And I think, again, for me, I know we talk about what is the value of running backs in the first round, and you kind of look at the history and the longevity and that kind of stuff. But for the Steelers, I just don't think you could have had sort of a better situation here to have someone like this who is really, really talented. And I think the only reason maybe he's at 24 is because we are putting less and less, value and maybe money into running backs, knowing sometimes the short-term, shelf life just of the position and the grind that comes along with it. But I really feel like that even, with the Steelers, I think the Steelers signed Caleb Ballage too, maybe, but like Najee Harris, they're not
Caleb
spending
Ballage
number
is
20.
awful. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, like, they did try to fill some of these spots, but you're not picking a guy at 24 unless he's going to come in and be, the starter right away. So I think that that's sort of a situation where he's going to come in. I think they're going to put him in a spot to have success. We saw the Steelers offense really kind of get back on track last season. How many more seasons did Big Ben have? I mean, I can't imagine it's more than one or two at this point, but still, we saw them have success last year offensively, and I think plugging him in, being able to, kind of do some of the things he can do, I think it's a perfect pick for the Steelers, just because you knew this was the direction they were going to have to go in, and now you feel like you got a guy that's pretty versatile there in the backfield, and so yeah, I think it's again another nice fit, at least on paper, for Najja Harris and the Steelers.
Any other thoughts on football before we shift to baseball for a minute?
No, I just think, like we said, some of the guys that are still out there, we talked about Barmore and Elijah Moore and Ojulari and guys like that. It's just seeing where they go here in this first part of the second round. I think will be interesting. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing to keep an eye on. Obviously, there's a lot of other players out there that we'll be tracking in the SEC over the weekend. But, yeah, I think you'll see some of those guys go pretty quickly, I would think, in the second round.
Well, Blake, I don't know if you watched any SEC baseball last night, but guess who did?
I bet you did.
I did. I had the 2TV thing going. I watched Auburn and Georgia before flipping over to Tennessee. And frankly, if you flipped over to Tennessee, Kentucky last night after the fourth inning, you missed everything. Because that game was 14-4, and the last run was scored in the fourth inning. Tennessee really got to Cole Stupp for Kentucky, who'd been really good. He had been one of the more durable starters in the league. I think there's a lot to be said for a guy, and Stupp will give up base runners, but he's a ground ball heavy guy, and he's one of those guys that on a Friday night can give you 6 or 7 innings, and usually good ones consistently. That did not happen for Kentucky. Tennessee tagged Stupp for 7 runs, 6 earned, and an inning and a third. He only got 1 ground out. They hit a couple home runs off him. The defense behind him at times was just dreadful, which did not help anything. Tennessee gets 3 home runs. The offense was just clicking. And on the opposite side, you got Chad Dallas, who is not one of the – I don't know that he's an upper half number 1 starter. He's probably more in the middle or the lower half, which in this league, nothing wrong with. But that kid has been pretty consistent in giving them quality outings and going late in games. So he was able to do that last night. They got Kirby Canel, who has struggled at times, some mop-up work in the 7th inning. He looked pretty good. He got a perfect inning, struck out a couple of guys, and then they just pieced it together with some guys after that to get through the game. But Kentucky really could have used a big win. The Cats are going to have to start putting some together in order to get to the NCAA tournament. That 9-9 record against SEC teams coming in was really against bottom-tier teams. And with that team not playing a lot of really good teams out of conference, again, the North Carolina series would have helped them, but that got canceled early because of COVID. The Cats need to pick up some big wins and did not do that last night while the Vols just keep rolling. I mean, that's a team, Blake, that just will bury you with base running and taking extra bases and just putting the ball in play. I mean, I don't know that Liam Spence is my pick for player of the year so far. And I think there's maybe a little bit of smoke and mirrors in that with batting average on play and stuff like that. But he just gets on base consistently. But Tennessee just stuck it to Kentucky last night.
All right. Something I was thinking about, and Barry may have the stat here, but I mean, think about this. Like with Tennessee, they scored 15 runs in the final 3 innings of the Texas A&M game.
Oh, yeah.
And then their next SEC game, they score, what was it, 14?
14 in the first 4. Yeah.
So in the last, in a 7-inning stretch in SEC play, like they scored 29 runs. That's just, like, that's something, isn't it? Like, and it's just... I mean, and it's not like they did it like, Kentucky, as we said. I mean, their record's kind of average, but it's not like they did it like against the bottom 2 teams or anything. So I just thought that was fascinating. I was thinking back that I was like, my goodness, this team in that stretch scored 29 runs in 7 innings. against SEC competition, and that is just not something that is easy to do. So, that was the one thing that stood out to me as I looked over at that score. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to watch it, but I looked at the score and I was like looking at the box score. I'm like, wait a second. In the first 4 innings, they scored 14 runs, and I'm just like, my goodness, this team can just explode at any time. And that's Tennessee right now, man. They are putting up runs, and good luck trying to slow them down.
Well, and that whole lineup hit last night. Every single starter got at least one hit. Most of them reached base a couple times. I mean, Kentucky, that just was an awful start to the series. The last thing you want to do is tax your bullpen early, and that's what happened. I mean, they ended up using, 5 guys in relief, so 6 total. So there was that. The Georgia-Auburn game was the exact opposite. That was just a pitcher's duel. Ryan Webb, I don't really know why Georgia pulled him as quickly as it did, because I think he went 6, shutout, only threw 64 pitches. A lot of fly ball outs in that game. The ball just was not carrying at Foley Field. And Auburn, man, I mean, you keep finding positives for Auburn, and I think Jack Owen was one. He goes, I think, 6 shutout last night or something along those lines. But, man, Auburn just every week it's the same thing. It's like, they're in games, and they find some way to lose it. And this time it was the Gonzalez kid, Georgia's freshman catcher, with the grand slam. But Auburn's got to start winning some games. And, again, the schedule gets a lot easier after this week. But that was one that was there for the taking, and Auburn just couldn't seize it.
Yeah, I was going to say, at some point you gotta win some games, and they just have not been able to do that. We talked about sort of the, probably some bad luck and really just that stretch of games where they lost, by 1 run, and just, having bad luck in there and not having things go your way. But like you said, at some point you got to win, and they just have not done that. I guess you look at it the rest of the way and you're thinking, okay, maybe there's something you could do here down the stretch, knowing you've still got, home series. Really, what's it, they got 2 series at home. They got LSU and A&M, and then they go to Missouri, which, if you're going to go on the road, that's probably not the worst place to go. So maybe they find some sort of momentum down the stretch, but as you said, it's just like the luck does not seem to be in their favor at this point, sitting there with a 3-16 record in league play.
Well, I take that back. Owen got charged with 2 runs, but it was Mason Barnett who gave up the home run. So he went 5, and I thought was really efficient. He was around the zone, 6 strikeouts, 2 walks. I mean, he's a big lefty that's got some potential, and with him, it's been staying healthy, I think, throughout his career. And speaking of which, I mean, Ryan Webb, that kid's a really good pitcher. If you like watching lefties with a good breaking ball, he is at the top of guys in this league. I think you'd like to see. Ben Harris got a 3-inning save for them. So, again, you look at 2 teams that really win it in a way you want to do it. In other words, you don't burn through a lot of pitching, and Georgia and Tennessee really got the upper hand, I think, last night, although Auburn only used a couple of relievers. But I think Georgia's deeper in its pen than is Auburn. So, anyway, that's that. Any transfer portal or college basketball news?
Not that I'm aware
of,
but as we said, at this point we're inching closer to 15. I guess, well, the one thing, but it's not really. I mean, Emmanuel Miller went to TCU, but I don't think that's. I mean, I can't say that's a huge shock just based on some of the rumors that are out there after he transferred. So that's the only thing. But I guess for actually bringing players in. Oh, and you know what? Texas A&M did get Henry Coleman from Duke. I forgot about that. So that's a pickup for a team that needs a lot of pickups right now.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I think, at this point, maybe we're starting to slow down on this transfer front, but we're at 1496 right now as of verbal commits. So I think we're easily going over 1500 here.
Yeah, that's big for A&M, just because that was one of those rosters that you look down and like, who on this team can play?
They just need players at this point.
Right. I mean, and I don't think Henry Coleman is going to be enough, but it's a start.
It's a start. I think maybe we're finally starting to hit that lull in the basketball offseason to where you can finally say, okay, now we have a feeling what these teams are going to look like. Now can we project what things are going to be next season? But it'll still be even tough because you just have so many moving parts, and you know how the chemistry is going to come together and all that. So it'll be interesting to talk to coaches here as they go throughout their summer workouts and such, because I think that's going to be interesting to see kind of how some of that chemistry comes along.
Well, Coleman was the number 52 player in his class by ESPN. He only played 95 minutes last year. So kind of this career could go a lot of ways.
Yep, I think so.
Anything else before we end the show?
Nope, I think that's it. Check out everything we got, southeastern14.com, all our rankings and stuff over there. And yeah, just as you know, draft should be fun the rest of the way. Should be a lot of SEC players still to be drafted, and big weekend of baseball. So
yeah, we've got power rankings for teams, hitters, and pitchers up at the site right now. We'll be back Monday. We'll recap the last 6 rounds of the draft. We'll have baseball. We'll have all kinds of stuff to talk about. But anyway, looking forward to a fun weekend. Anytime you get to that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th weekend in SEC play baseball, it's a lot of fun because you got teams jockeying for NCAA tournament positioning, for Hoover seeding, for national seeds, all that, and then throwing the draft. And we will not be short of topics on Monday.
No, we won't. Plenty to talk about.
All right, for Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. Be sure and check our workout at southeastern14.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 14Southeastern. Anyway, have a great, safe, and happy weekend. We'll see you back here Monday on the 14th.